Hey, what are you doing on March 6th and 7th? How about making your way to DX3 in Toronto for a 2-day deep dive into digital marketing, digital advertising, and digital retailing? Along with a free exhibit hall, there are going to be over 40 sessions, including speakers from Microsoft, Salesforce.com, Google, Well.ca, Facebook, Lowe's, and Mountain Equipment Co-op. Come see what one attendee called a rare thing in the digital world. Register at www.dx3canada.com today. See you there. Welcome, everybody, to Untether.tv. I'm your host and founder, Rob Woodbridge. Of course, this is the place you come to find a little bit of behind-the-scenes activity in the mobile space, some thinking around how people are building and moving their business into this mobile space that we love so much. It's great. Part of the fascination around the mobile space is around discovery, and I think there's two layers of discovery. There's a app discovery, which is the biggest challenge I think app makers have on the planet right now, is being discovered. And then there's this subset of apps inside of this industry that are discovery apps themselves. Like you launch them every single day to find out, like Google searching, like your email searching, like Twitter searching, and then there's specialized apps like one that we're going to eventually talk about. This one's called Timbre. It's created by my guest, Mark Kasdorf. And this is an interesting thing because it's about finding local bands. Who's playing where? Music and band discovery app. But there's a huge twist around this because what Mark is involved in with his offices, within his Intrepid brand of companies, is pretty incredible. And we're going to dive into all of that right now. We're going to see if we can get through all of this in a very short period of time. Mark, welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Rob, thanks for having me.
This is there is so much to talk about around what you're doing with Intrepid. So you've got something called Intrepid Labs, you've got something called you've got your Intrepid development company, and then you've got a bunch of apps that you've done for people and done for yourself. And we're really going to talk about this very, very, very quickly. Hopefully, we're going to get through it all in this very short period of time we have. But first of all, where are you located? Who are you, and what is Intrepid?
Sure. So my name is Mark Kasdorf. We're located in Kendall Square, actually just about 2 blocks outside Kendall Square, just across the river from Boston, right in the heart of kind of the tech mecca here in Boston. I'm involved in 3 companies right now. I've founded 3 companies that are all active and well in the last 3 years or so. So I'll give you just a quick background and history of myself. So I went to law school, Boston University. I graduated in 2009. About halfway through law school, I started my first software company. It was a company called Burning Hollow Technologies. I spent my entire third-year law school in diligence with Atlas and Founder Collective, and spent a bunch of time with Greylock. And I kind of jokingly tell people in Boston that I did Techstars by myself in a year, right? And so I met a ton of people. I built a great network. I formed an incredible advisory board. But ultimately, that company didn't quite make it.
What happened to it?
I'd love to blame it on the fact that I was a 23-year-old CEO with no track record trying to raise money in 2009.
Okay.
Capital markets were pretty tight. It was, we got really close. I had VCs telling me on 2 occasions, we were within a week of term sheet if diligence calls went well. But there was something like 8 A rounds in all of Boston in 2009, right? So it was really, really tough year to raise money. We had some problems with the business model, and it's a long story, but we got close considering my age and the times.
So that obviously didn't go as planned, right? But that didn't obviously knock you out of this kind of entrepreneurial addiction that you have, did it?
Absolutely not. No, it was just
it was affliction. It's not an addiction; it's an affliction, right? I think that's a better term. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like a disease with no cure.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
All right. So from that time, 2009, what's next?
So that company went on right up until February 2010. I was actually in the middle of diligence with a group called Walnut Angels here in Boston in February 2010. Not that you want my whole family background, but I had a 4-month-old and a wife that wasn't happy that she was still working, and it was a turbulent time in my life. So I shut down diligence in February. And in March, I did two things. I started to look for a law firm job, which I really didn't want to have to get. And I started a company called Intrepid Pursuits, which at the time was really meant to be little more than a shell company to do a little bit of consulting for two developers that I had at Burning Hollow. They were fantastic guys. One of them knew how to write iPhone apps. I had a relatively deep Rolodex in Boston, so I called a couple people up, found a company that really needed an app built, and had just enough money to sponsor one of the guys' H-1B visa and put dinner on their tables while I looked for a law firm job.
Wow. Wow. So you actually paid them instead of you.
I didn't end up drawing a salary until November of that year.
So this is 2011.
This is 2010.
Okay.
2010. So Intrepid was incorporated March 8th, 2010. So just about 3 years.
And this was strictly a service company that you were trying to build, right? So build people's apps for them. Service for hire.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, honestly, it wasn't even, at that moment in time in March, I wasn't even trying to build a service company. I was just trying to, find enough income for two amazing young developers.
That was it? Okay.
Yeah.
So you managed to do that, obviously.
We managed to do that, yep. In kind of April, May into June, we went from two developers and one client to two developers and two clients. In August, we found a third client that was a really big app, really through raw luck. Actually, it's kind of a good story. I had a grand total, I think, of $13,000 in revenue in August. We didn't have an office. We were working at a coffee shop, so I was still looking for a law firm job. And though at this point in time, pretty half-heartedly, as it started to nibble at me that there might be something to this whole mobile thing. So I sent an email I had to get set up books. I had to keep the accounting books for this company that had $13,000 in revenue. So I did a bunch of research and found some cool accounting companies, one of which was a company called Cashew. It's actually in Canada. So I set up our books in Cashew and liked it, and I sent them a support ticket saying, I really wish you guys had an iPad app. And by the way, we know how to do that stuff. We could write it. The CEO emailed me back about an hour and a half later and said, we're bidding out our iPad app. Why don't you submit a bid? Which is kind of cool, serendipity. And we looked at their spec, and we were the only shop that, and again, I had no experience. I'd never been a consultant. I'd never been anything but a student. I went straight from undergrad to law school. And I hadn't had a job. And I said, look, I don't know much about reading a spec, but this doesn't look like one. Why don't we do this time and materials? We'll cut you a really good rate because we're new, and we'll see if we can help you figure out what you want to build. And they loved it, and we won the contract. Hired a third developer in August. And up until this point in time, I don't know if you've ever run a consulting business, but anyone who has run a consulting business, you've got this thing called accounts receivable that you have to fund. Right, so up until September, I was funding our accounts receivable line with my home equity line of credit because I had to pay developers and clients hadn't paid me yet. So it wasn't big numbers, but in September we crossed over into like real cash flow positive, where I didn't have to dip into my accounts receivable. And November 1st, I paid myself my first salary, and November 2nd, my wife put in her 2 weeks notice at her job.
Wow. So relatively quickly, what do you think it was? It was just the momentum of the industry, the simplicity of what you were doing in relation to the idea that you had before?
I think it was the momentum of the industry. Like I jokingly tell people, but it's not really a joke. At that point in time, it was even worse than it is now. Right? If I interviewed a developer in a Starbucks once in early 2011, right? And we're talking, and I naturally talk kind of loud, and people overheard us. And as I was leaving, two people at different tables tugged on my sleeve and gave me a business card and said, "Hey, I heard you develop apps. We're looking for one." And so, we're still in the middle of this time. It's not quite that crazy anymore, but we were sitting in a time when you basically had to stand on a pedestal and say, "I write apps," and people would tackle you because they were so desperate for apps.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that it's just that may have abated, but it hasn't subsided, right? I think that people are getting a little bit smarter with what they're doing in this space, and we're going to talk about that as we go through here. But so you launch Intrepid Pursuits, you find your first customer, which is Cashew. You build their app. They're satisfied. This kind of launches the consulting practice for you, right?
Yep.
So I want to fast forward a little bit because you launch it, you start to develop apps, and then was 2011 just an accelerant year for you?
It was
Yeah.
crazy. We in 2011 we grew all bootstrap, no money in, from 4 to 15 full-time people.
Wow.
It was a really crazy. I spent probably about 1,000 hours, about half the year recruiting, and the other half the year selling. That's all I did for an entire year. It was a lot of fun.
I can imagine it was a lot of fun. But
Yeah.
have you ever seen anything? I guess you were new to the industry. You're new to this entrepreneurial world, but you haven't seen anything like that. That kind of growth.
I think Wayfair here in Boston and so forth, these CSN stores, right? They grew from 0 to $1 billion in revenue in 4 or 5 years with no money in. So I think people do it. We definitely we weren't the first people that tried to grow without money, and not a lot of people are successful. It was a crazy year, but we stumbled through it.
How did you was it really that the apps were falling off the trees, so to speak? Everywhere you looked, there were people looking for apps. How did you grow the revenue without dipping into your line again or finding some investment?
Yeah, so I probably did dip into my home equity line of credit once or twice in 2011. Our rates went up substantially in 2011. For people that know rates, in 2010 we were charging for senior mobile developers a whopping $75 an hour, which
Crazy.
is like you can go that's Ukraine rates. It's not U.S. rates. So we got early clients because we were cheap, because we were local, and we started to build a reputation. In 2011, we used we did everything by the book, and we didn't do anything illegal, but we used interns, unpaid interns doing internal projects that weren't going to see the light of day. Trained people up that way, got them involved in client work as we started to pay them. We were really, really capital efficient. We didn't have an office. We did everything from CIC in Boston, which is Cambridge Innovation Center. So it was $250 per person per month, which means as a company of 4, it was $1,000 a month, and we had a printer and phone lines and everything. Everyone had their own computer in those very early days. We didn't buy hardware from people, so we were really capital efficient. We did, and we, even at $75 an hour, those are decent rates. It's $3,000 a week. So if you can keep people booked, you can, and you're willing to live right on the razor's edge, you can grow pretty quick. But I will say, looking back, it would have taken all of a 1-month slowdown at that point to put us under. We had no cash reserves. We had no security. It was just kind of race as quickly as you can.
It's funny because you can look at that hindsight, right? Maybe when you've got a little bit of stability and then you kind of look back and realize how close you were to utter and absolute destruction. And I think that's what I describe entrepreneurship as being, an inch off the ground going 1,000 miles an hour, right? Any little wobble, you're done, right? And I think that until a point where you can actually reflect and look back. I think that's the difference between the mettle that an entrepreneur has and, somebody who is playing an entrepreneur doesn't have, right? Which is that ability to be unwavering. And even if you are that close, not to ignore it. You have to know, but you don't get frightened by it. You don't get spooked by it. And then maybe when it's all done, you look back and you say, oh my God, how did we do that? Right? Is that what happened to you?
A little bit. Yeah. I woke up one day in, when was it? Kind of May 2012, and our payroll had grown from $10,000 a month to $100,000 a month in just a year and a half. And I thought, we didn't have a business line of credit, we didn't have any debt financing, we had a credit card with an $8,000 limit. I said, holy cow! We need to get real. And we got a line of credit, and we hired a COO, and we morphed the company. I think. I still think of us as a startup, and most of the work we do is for startups. But we kind of transitioned a bit from that, an inch off the ground at 1,000,000 miles an hour to a little bit more of a company that thought about the future and became a little bit more stable.
So, I mean, what's the size of the team now for Intrepid?
We've got 22 full-time people now. We'll probably be 25 full-time people by the end of this quarter, at which point we're going to kind of plateau out for a while.
It's interesting because there's opportunity probably to grow. I mean, I've seen some companies start at 3 people, 2 people, and then grow to 150 people, right? And I've seen this. I've interviewed a bunch of these companies that have kind of gone through that meteoric, concave growth. It's incredible what's happened. But I always get nervous for them, right? Because just as quickly as it comes, it can disappear, right? And remember the old web days. You were too young, I know. I'm an old guy. But the web days is that, you used to spend much more than $75 an hour on HTML programmers, right? And now that's like basically data input, right? HTML isn't even it's not a programming language. But back then, you get $1,000 or $1,200 a day for being an HTML programmer in the web days. And then look what happened. Like that bottomed out. Now it's like $5 an hour. Right? You might as well work at Starbucks instead of program HTML. Or the complexity of the language is now far greater than HTML because of the way that, a certain HTML5, blah, 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 blah. But, so there's that ability to morph as a company and grow, and then have to go through those setbacks and let people off. Now, 25 people to me is like the optimum size, maybe a little bit even big, like 22, 23, to be able to build a great foundation, a boutique shop that charges a crap load of money for doing exceptional applications in the mobile space. Is that what your goal is?
Absolutely. So I spend a fair amount of time like talking to entrepreneurs and working with people in Boston. I'm a Techstars mentor now. What I often tell people is a company kind of goes through a diametric shift every factor of 2, right? I shouldn't take credit for this. One of my advisors told me this once, but you go from 1 to 2 people, and you have a partner, and you have to make joint decisions, and you have like someone you can talk to. You go from 2 to 4, and you have employees, and you have to like pay them and payroll and such. You go from 4 to 8, and you have company culture and benefits and healthcare, right? And you go from 8 to 16, you got a whole other shift. You need a COO, and we're right in the middle of the 16 to 32, and we're probably not going to go all the way to 32. I did enough research into the 32 to 64 to know that if we wanted to make that next jump, we need an HR director, and we need a part-time CFO who's in once a week, and we need to build a bunch of stuff and a layer of management that I don't want to build. I'm not interested in having that kind of company. And we also have to morph our culture. Like I have a very specific culture we've created at Intrepid. We the whole company goes to the same restaurant every Thursday morning for a full team scrum. We pile into 25 people, pile into the back room. You can't do that with 50 people. Right. I mean, we have barbecues all summer long. Like we do a bunch of stuff now that we couldn't do if we got much bigger. So we made a really firm decision not to get much bigger.
I can't. My experience in that is I grew a company to 65 people, and it was unwieldy, right? It is the culture changes, and I don't know about you, but we were jammed into this tiny little space. When we were 30 people, we were jammed into this space, and we were shoulder to shoulder, and you knew what the guy next to you had for lunch, and you knew what was going on in their family, and you understood what was happening. And then we expanded our office space, and we blew out a wall in our office space and expanded and opened it up, and then everybody kind of spilled out of that office and spread out, and that culture dissipated, right? That energy was destroyed, right? So it was not a good experience. The company thrived, but it was not a good experience when it came to culture. And then you had cliques, and you had all these different. It just didn't seem like we were all rowing in the same direction, right? And that's the challenge, certainly when you grow that fast. So that's my experience with it. And some people thrive on that. I'm much more like you. I love this idea, small team. Nobody leaves because it's like a little family, right? And maybe that's just the Canadian in me, but I want to be aggressive, and I'm sure you do as well. So how do you drive revenue with a small team?
So to date, it's all been through growing consulting because again, we've kind of doubled and tripled in size for the last 3 years every year, and this will be the first year where we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, we made a firm decision about halfway through our growth to, and kind of what we wanted to be when we grew up, right? And this kind of is going to segue fairly nicely into Timbre. So we made a couple decisions, end of 2011, early 2012. The first is to launch Intrepid Labs, which I can talk about in a minute. And the second was to become a company that was, every consulting business operates on an 80-20 rule, right? For most consulting companies, we outsource 20% of our work. We do 80% in-house, so that when work ebbs a bit, we, lay off our contractors, but it's not really laying off because they were just contractors, and our team stays fully utilized, right? And that keeps risk relatively low. We operate on a very different 80-20 rule, which is we spend 80% of our time consulting and 20% of our time building internal products.
So what do you consult on then? Walk me through that process. So the 80% that you're consulting, you're going into companies and basically telling them what they need based on their strategy?
Not really. No, that's kind of the very agency model, right? Our consulting falls roughly into three different buckets. Bucket number one, which used to be the whole bucket, was agency work. So big agencies like Isobar or Mobiquity, they sell big projects to Fortune 500 companies, and we are their contractor. Like, we're their outsourced 20%. A lot of them have really great in-house mobile teams. Some don't have a mobile team, but we're known in Boston to be a solid mobile dev shop. So we've done a fair bit. About a third of our work is agency work. The next bucket, which is kind of new for us, is mid-market startup work. So, company raises a B or a C round of $10 to $30 million, and suddenly mobile is going to be a big chunk of their strategy. And we've kind of gone into some companies like that and occasionally help them figure out what to build, but we're not pitching projects. They know they're going to go mobile. We're going to help them do that. And then, more than 40% of our work is startup work. So we help startups build MVPs. We help startups that raise anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million build their product. A lot of these are mobile first startups. A lot of times we're helping them interview, we're helping them hire, we're helping them transition the project from us to an in-house team. But the reality is we can typically build the first big version of a mobile startup's product quicker than they can hire a single engineer. Right? So if they raise $500,000 for 70 or 80 grand, we can have them in the market in 2 months and help them hire along the way.
Yeah, and then ultimately you transition out of that work for them. They bring that in and maintain it if they win.
We very rarely maintain. We have a couple little retainer agreements, but again, they're all with big companies.
Yeah.
With the smaller companies, part of the goal is for us to help them find someone to take over once we've gotten them into the market as quickly as possible.
I mean, it's a very effective strategy for them, but for you, I mean, does that cap your ability to charge them? As I've worked with some great mobile startups, companies like yours, maybe a little bit less diversified than what you guys are doing, but they're charging six figures, like $250,000, $350,000 for app development for some of the large companies. Do you like that? That's a great boutique. That's a great business, right? Where you're working with 3 or 4 clients and you're doing $1.5 million with a small team of 12 or 13 people. And I think that that can escalate pretty quickly because you build a reputation, and then obviously your rates go up as your reputation and demand goes up. Is that what you're starting to see right now?
A little bit. We've purposely kind of shied away from having like 1 or 2 customers be 30 to 40 to 50% of our revenue.
Smart.
We like working with startups. We like, our average project size is not 250. Our average project size is probably 50 to 100. So it's still real money.
Yes.
But we bill iteratively, we bill weekly, we don't take equity, we don't defer, we don't cut our rates. We're really firm with startups about that. I get asked that all the time. We're not a great, if you've raised $75,000 in friends and family money, unless you want to spend all of it with us, we're not a great fit. Our typical client has raised anywhere from $500K to $2.5 million. And, for them, $100K it's a lot of money, but that was the plan. It was to raise $500K and get an app into the market and solve some need that people have. And we're usually in the budget for that.
How often do you go into an idea? I mean, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but how often do you go into an idea, into a company that has raised that money, $5 to $2.5 million, and sat down with them, and then at the end of that meeting, come to a conclusion that their original idea sucked? Does that happen?
raising money isn't a perfect proxy, but it's a good enough proxy that most of the people that I meet with that have raised money, their idea doesn't suck. Um, we sometimes help them tweak it, we help them position it, but we don't. We try not to play the part of the VC.
Yeah.
We have passed on projects on rare occasions that we just didn't think could be successful, and we didn't want to take their money if we thought what they were building was useless to the market. But it's only happened once or twice, and it's usually family money. It's not a venture-backed company. We try not to be that picky.
That's good. Diplomatic answer there, because if any of the guys that you've worked with are sitting there listening, it's, wait a second. But I'm always intrigued because I've talked to a lot of guys up here. There's a Founder Fuel in Canada, which is in Montreal. It's like Techstars, right? But it's I talked with a company called Oomph, which is 3 O's and MF, and they got into Founder Fuel with a crappy idea, and they sat down with in a mentor roundtable and got hammered by the mentor, saying this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard, and they had to quickly turn it around. I sometimes these dumb ideas do get through. They turn it around into quite a successful company, raised a great seed round, and are flying. But I mean, I'm always interested by that because this industry changes so quickly. From Monday to Friday, the idea that was amazing on Monday, by the time they've gone through that process of raising and going back and forth with the investor and then coming to the point where they've actually got the cash, that idea could be outdated.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely moving fast. I would say we see some of the crappy ideas on the pre-seed side, and I bet I spend a quarter of my time with pre-seed companies, helping them raise money, helping them refine their idea. I think I very rarely see someone who's passionate, that has an idea, that can't, with a relatively small pivot, get to something that's really great. It's not that it's a terrible idea. It's that it needs to be tweaked to solve more people's pain point than just theirs.
Right. It's a good point. And, for an episode like this, it's black and white. The idea sucks or it doesn't, but there's shades of gray. How terrible is that? Oh. Okay, so I'm going to try to bring this back on track now, which is around. I want to finish off with what you're doing with the Intrepid brand of companies, because, as I was doing my research on you in January, it dawned on me that you got your hands in everything, because you're doing you're doing this consultancy with Intrepid Pursuits, and then you alluded to it. You've got this thing called Intrepid Labs, which is I guess right behind you. If you're not watching this video, right behind him, there's a whole bunch of hustle and bustle. But what is Intrepid Labs, man?
Yeah. So right over my shoulder, there's actually, if I move my head, there's a Kanban board for one of the startups here. The sticky notes on the whiteboard, the window whiteboard. But it's so when we hit 12 people, we grew out of CIC, which a lot of your viewers, especially from Boston, they'll know what CIC is. It's amazing, right? CIC calls themselves a startup hotel. Right, so you don't have to bring a towel, you don't have to bring shampoo. Everything you need to start a company but yourself and a computer is in CIC. Right? They've got enough snacks. You can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. There's a shower there. There's a printer there. There's great internet. There's everything. It's fabulous. So CIC has 2 different products. They have their co-working center and they have their dedicated office space. So we were actually, for people who know CIC, we are the reason. Intrepid is the reason that CIC now has a cap on the co-working space, because we just kept growing in the co-working space and we loved it there. We didn't want a dedicated office.
It's your fault.
So we got up to...
It's your fault.
Yeah.
You got to talk to Mark then.
We got up to, I think, 10 people. We had 8 full-time employees and 6 interns. We had 14 people in the co-working center, where the average company size was 3, and we were taking up 2 full tables, which was, like, at that time, a third of the entire co-working center. And they said, look, you really need an office.
Out. Get out. Is that what they were saying to you?
So
They're kicking you.
Moved into one of their dedicated offices. They were great. And although we didn't mind it, we didn't love it. We didn't like, part of the CIC models, the offices are pretty small and there's shared resources, and it was great, but it wasn't for us. So we started looking for our own office. right? We started for like 2 weeks. We did a very typical office search. We looked at spaces from 3 to 5,000 square feet. We could only look at sublets because I wasn't going to sign a 3 to 5 year lease when I was growing 100% year over year. So we started looking for office space, and we realized that the worst thing a rapidly growing startup can do is get their own office. It's a terrible proposition. You have to sign a long-term lease. You have to dedicate a ton of your time to something that's totally non-core. Like, there's nothing core about finding an office, and it takes forever. You have to buy a printer and get internet working, and then keep the internet working, which is a lot harder than it sounds. And get a maintenance crew and buy coffee, and there's all this crap that you need to do, and suddenly you realize that you might only be a 9-person company. You need an office manager, and that's 50 grand for someone who's non-core, who's not doing anything to move your company forward other than keeping people from strangling you. So we totally, by happenstance, we looked in this building, which is called the American Twine Building in Kendall Square. It's got a lot of startup karma. There's a lot of cool companies that have started here. And I looked at a 1,200 square foot office, which is a little too small. And I said, is there any other space in the building? Because I love the building. It's all brick and beam, and it's old and it's cool. And they said, well, there's one office, but it's kind of big. And I said, just show it to me. And it was 11,000 square
Kind
feet.
of big. 10 times the size of the office you're looking at. Kind of big. I love it.
It had a cafe, and it had a roof deck. It's the whole floor. The elevator opens right into the space. And it was the old Dogpatch Labs in Boston before Dogpatch moved. So it was set up to be a co-working
Come
center.
on. So I just spent some time with Caleb Elston from Yobongo, who launched Yobongo from Dogpatch Labs in that space.
So they were they Boston?
Yeah.
Boston Dog? Yeah. So they were probably in this space, because I know most of the current Dogpatch companies. So they were probably in this space, right? It's amazing. It's an 8,000 square foot bullpen. There's 8 conference rooms. There's a roof deck. It's incredible. So I immediately fell in love with the space. And no joke, I went home that night and I told my wife, I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to find a way to get my company into that space. Right? And
I love it.
I'll tell you exactly what the rent was, but north of 30 grand a month. I mean, it's an 11,000 square foot space in Kendall Square. It's not cheap. So I asked the realtor for an intro. I said, who owns the building? And did a little bit of research. And I found that this company called Transatlantic owns the building, and it's mostly family owned. And I went to the building owner, and I basically wrote a quick business plan and pitched him on the concept of shared office space and how quickly it's growing and what a great thing it would be to support. And he loved it. We moved in 3 weeks later, right? So we kind of created this concept for a shared office space. So CIC and the other co-working spaces in Boston, they do this amazing job of getting companies from 1 to 5, right? And we had grown out of that and broken that model. And what I pitched to the building owner was, I want to be the place that companies grow from 5 to 25, right? It's a different set of problems. You're worried more about recruitment and fundraising, and there's a bunch of problems you have to solve that you're not solving from 1 to 5. And that's what I wanted to do, and that's what we did. And the building owner loved it, and we filled up fast, and we were making full rent within just a couple months, and it ended up being a really big win-win.
So did you take on the full 30 grand a month on spec, like that you could fill the rooms, or did he give you some kind of a deal or discount or amnesty for the first 2 months?
We got the very typical, we took it in as-is condition, which for a landlord's a big deal. You don't have to do any build out at all. We even took all the crap that was already in there and threw some of it out and kept some of it. And he gave us, I think, a month and a half of free rent for that, as well as waiving part of the security deposit. But we were pretty much expected. We had a bigger grace period than most, but we were making full rent within just a couple months, and that was important. We didn't get any breaks. We signed a normal lease. He didn't breach his fiduciary duty to his investors at all, other than the fact that if we hadn't been able to make rent, he might have had to flip someone else in there. But it had been empty for 11 months, so we weren't too big of a risk.
Yeah. Even if you hit 1 month, at some point, it's better than having an empty open space, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's been really great for the building. Several companies that didn't think we were a fit took space elsewhere in the building. We have a good kind of karma effect on the rest of
I
the
love it.
building.
I love it. And one of the companies is the Tap Lab. And I interviewed Dave Basiglia, who started that company. It's a location-based game. At least it was when I interviewed him a couple of years ago. And it's pretty cool. I love the ecosystem that everything falls into place. And certainly the karma's good there.
Oh yeah, we've got a couple game companies. We've got a mobile payments company in here. It's the mix is really, really good.
Well, so now I understand why you got into this space. So Intrepid Labs is as a direct result, and I've been guilty of this, is that I fell in love with the space, and I got to figure out how to fill it, right? I got to figure out how to afford the space. It's typical, right? So that's why Intrepid Labs is there. Now you rent it out, and it fills a niche and it fills a need, and I love it. And it's another revenue source in theory, and ultimately it allows you to go to a place that you enjoy working at, which is pretty awesome. So, so then. But your focus is really on the app side, right? Is on the Intrepid Pursuits. Is that where you guys? Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in Intrepid Labs is. I'll tell you this: anyone who wants to start a co-working center to make money, not a good line of business. Starting a co-working center to improve the culture of your own company, great idea.
And idea flow. Like I started to think about all of those different kinds of companies coming in, non-competitive companies coming in, sharing problems, sharing challenges, and overcoming. And I think that there becomes a like your team within Intrepid Pursuit. It becomes a familial feel where it's a communal think tank for idea solving.
No, it's been the shared problem solving has been at the kind of management level has been amazing. Right, having 10 CEOs that are all at roughly the same point, they're raising money from the same people, they're making intros. It's been really, really valuable. And the other thing it's been valuable for, I meet with startups, not that I want you to spend the whole interview on talking about opening a co-working space, but we're a little bit more expensive to be here. We charge startups $500 per desk per month. So for a 10-person company, we're $5,000 a month. And they can usually go get their own office space for $3,000. And if they want to get really cheap and find a dungy building in, someplace in Boston that people don't really want to go, they get some for $1,000, right? $1,000 a month. So we're, in some senses, we're expensive, right? But when you cannot attract engineers to your dungy space, suddenly we become very cheap.
Yes, no kidding.
Intrepid Labs is a great recruitment tool because we're a 5-minute walk from the Red Line. We're gorgeous. We have free coffee, free snacks, free cereal. It's all included. We got a roof deck. It is so much easier to recruit top talent when you're in an amazing office than when you're in a rat hole. And it's a really tangible benefit.
Mark, I'm on my way. I gotta come and work out of that office space. I'm packing up my family from Canada. We're moving in. Do you accept families?
We'll have to talk about the rates.
That's right. They're kids. They're fine. They'll just make mess. All right. So you're doing services. You're being paid by other people to build their environments, or to consult with them, to build, to develop, to ideate, to do all those things that you do as a consulting firm. So how? This is what we're supposed to be talking about, right? How does Timbre come into this? How do you transition from that into building apps for yourself? First of all, what is Timbre? Let's start there.
Sure. So Timbre is a music discovery app. It's actually not quite music discovery. It's more of a band discovery app. So the point of Timbre is to enable you very, very quickly to hear all the music happening around you, to listen to that music and go to that show, right? So that is what Timbre is today. Where Timbre came from is where most of our app ideas come from. So first, let me talk about kind of our model, this 20% time, right? So the first thing is, if you want to be a consulting company that builds products, you have to be really, really disciplined. Consulting is like heroin. It's great. I can't keep the analogy going perfully, but
you make a lot of money. Wait, heroin doesn't make me a lot of money.
Yeah, it doesn't make you money, but you make a lot of money. So if you want to do product, the first thing you have to be able to do is say no to contracts, right? You have to isolate those internal developers and turn down another $5 or $10 or $30,000 a month in revenue because you're working on your thing, right? So our opportunity costs for building products on the consulting side is really, really high.
Yeah.
You have to forego growth. You have to be
It's
really.
known revenue versus abstract hope, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So the second thing is you need ideas, right? We're not an incubator. We don't take other people's ideas. So, and this kind of goes back to our discipline and our committing to building product. We do a couple of things. The first thing we do is we have an internal hackathon the week between Christmas and New Year's every year, right? So we forego an entire week's worth of revenue, which at our current rates and our current team size is actually, like, I ran the math
Don't do
last year.
that.
There's a lot.
Don't do that. Like, why would you do that,
Yeah.
right? Wait a second.
So we do a full week-long internal hackathon. We do no consulting, and I put no influence on the ideas. Like, people can build whatever they want. They build games. They can build anything, and the goal is to give people relatively significant amount of time to build something cool, to do rapid prototyping. The other thing we do is we go to a lot of hackathons in Boston. So I kind of give people an incentive to go to hackathons, and that's actually what Timbre came out of. So we went to this, my CTO went to this, his name is Matt Bridges, and I want to actually correct something you said earlier. You called me the creator of Timbre. And this is a bone to pick within the company because a bunch of people have said that. I didn't create Timbre. My Intrepid created Timbre, and very specifically, this guy, Matt Bridges, an amazing developer with us. He's our CTO. He personally went to this hackathon, and the theme of the hackathon was connecting disconnected communities. Right, so one of the speakers at the hackathon was an artist, a local artist, and what he said was, we live in this world of Pandora, and Spotify, and iTunes, and now anyone in the world can find my music. I have people in Russia listening to my songs, right? The problem is the people who live down the street don't know that I'm playing anymore because they're listening to Russian music on Pandora. So, the whole world is flipped, and it's a big problem because, until you reach the point of like Mumford and Sons or Taylor Swift, you make all your money on ticket sales and merchandise. Like, that's how artists make their money. So in addition to that, at that same point in time, Spotify. So Spotify had just released Spotify, which was a way for people to stream Spotify music into other apps. And we wanted to play with it. So he wanted to play with it, not we even. So in a weekend, he kind of hacked together the very first early prototype of Timbre, which was, use Jambase, which is a concert discovery tool, query Jambase and match up Jambase with stuff in Spotify. It's kind of cool, right? Only it was, you tap on a cell and you get the music, and it was very simple and Spartan. And the hackathon was 2 weeks long. So, he came in on Monday with this really cool thing that played music, and we handed it to another developer who was supposed to be building internal stuff and wanted a little bit of a break that day, and said, hey, could you make this look cool? And it was a developer, not a designer. So we took that initial concept of play music, do a query against concert listings and play music, and we handed it to a second developer, and he made that, what I would like to say is the iconic Timbre view, or something grand like that. That really cool list view that people get all excited about, that took another day or two.
That's all it took?
Yeah. I won't give away the secret sauce of how we did it, but it wasn't hard.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to pull it up here for you who are watching, and I'm going to just put it on my screen here because, this is what really was appealing to me, is that this interface is unbelievable. The flow of it, the way that you've done the calendaring system, the way that you've done the artists. These are all artists for those who can see, and then you click on it and it pulls it up into a little bit of information, and then you'll hear it. Right, where you're sampling music, and then you can click. Great interface where you can buy tickets, you can tweet it out, you can do anything. You can send it to Facebook. I mean, the interface is minimal, but beautiful. And this, you're telling me, that took a day and a developer to do this?
Yeah, it's somewhat disingenuous to say that. It took a day to make something that looks cool and that was a working prototype. Right. It took something longer than 3 or 4 months to turn that into kind of an enterprise class app that wasn't going to break and could handle many users and was scalable. So this was all done, and that kind of first 2-week prototype was done in May 2012, and we didn't launch the app till September.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that it's the finesse that is the most important part, right? So that the idea that, you started, did it start clunky, right? Was the interface clunky to begin with, and then you just started to chip away and refine?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll tell you, it's unfortunate. It's really hard to build things of the quality of Timbre. And I'm not saying that arrogantly. The reason I mean it's hard is, the Timbre in its current version is probably 100 iterations of working prototypes in. For such a simple app, the amount of money we would have charged a client to go through that many iterations is astronomical. Like no one, for an app that simple, no one is willing to pay for that much development time, right? Because it's not design, right? That app is user experience. And the only way we can arrive at that was through iteration after iteration after iteration of working prototypes seeded into a beta group, to get to a point, now it looks easy. Hey, we should have just done that. Which is true, but it actually took a long time to get to the point where you open the app, you tap once, and you're hearing music.
Yeah.
Like that's it. It's one tap.
So you said it's not design; it's user experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of semantics to a degree.
No. But that's. I mean, I think that everybody, when you understand that, it's not a design. Right. This is it's an immersive environment that is so simple to use, and I kind of equate it to I don't even know how to describe it. It's there's a certain level of sophistication in simplicity, right? And that's what this is. That's the difference between design and an experience, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have 3 internal designers, and they're phenomenal. The only things they did on Timbre was the icon design. Right, the rest was all done through working iterations, developers building different things and trying them out. It was all done by developers.
When it comes to kind of interface like this, the interface challenges, right? You don't want it to be like everybody else. I mean, you don't want to pick a day. And you don't want that custom or the common look and feel, right? So that you're lumped into everything else. And so when do you go off and task your developers to say, okay, go and think of something crazy, or is it on them? Do they have that desire to be able to say, listen, I don't want it to look like everything else. We want this to be an app that's remembered and used often and marveled at the user experience and the interface. Do they go off and try to come up with the craziest ideas to be able to display that information?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 questions there.
There's probably 7 questions there, actually, Mark. But if you can find 2 in there, I'd take them. Answer the 2 that you heard, please.
Okay, sounds good. So the first is, I wish I could say I had more input on Timbre between May and September, but I had almost none. Like it was really Matt and another developer on our team, Colin, and the designers had some input and whiteboarding. I had very little input other than giving the random opinion, right? So it wasn't me saying go think of stuff. It's not good enough yet. There's none of that, right? It was them kind of iterating and building something awesome. And it wasn't, Timbre wasn't the sort of thing that was 40 hours a week for 2 people for 4 months, right? It was, a day to prototype something and then 3 days to think about it, and then another day to prototype something and 3 days to think about it. And there's no way we could have done it in less than 4 months, even if we had spent full time on it. And I would say at least 8 different developers touched the code and tried things and did things before it finally came out in September.
Was there ever a thought, like as you're going through this process, I mean, I know you're distant from it and it's happening, but was there ever that thought in your head, like, come on, guys, like, what are you doing? Like, let's just get this out there. Let's do something. It's fine. Let's go. Was there ever that frustration? And then a second piece to that, was there ever that frustration inside the company with the developers and the designers that are involved with this, thinking, we're never going to get it. It's like an albatross. It's sitting on a stool over in the corner. We're never going to get this right. So first of all, your frustration and then theirs. Was there any of that?
Not for Timbre, not even remotely.
So passion project.
I think actually we have this problem. We have other internal projects. We have an internal project right now that's going to the AppStore on March 1st that the original release date was July 1st, 2012. Right? So we have several albatrosses in the corner.
Okay.
But Timbre's not one of them. Timbre was soup to nuts, 4 months. And we needed every minute. We were excited every minute. The energy was high. Nothing ever slackened. I think for anyone who's built a piece of really polished software, no matter how small it is, 4 months is it's a good amount of time. It's not super fast. It's definitely not that long. We needed the time to polish it and make it perfect and make it scalable. And we kind of had a hunch. We had this joke. I think we should have done it. We should have done a series of impression videos, like show people Timbre and secretly videotape their faces as they see it. Because as we started seeding it out to a broader and broader group of beta testers back in August, the reactions we had were just incredible. I mean, it's the first time people see Timbre, their jaw drops. And I can't exactly say words like that modestly, but it really is like people have a big reaction to it.
Well, the guy who introduced me to Timbre, Patrick Reynolds from Triton Digital, right? So they do, among other things, is that they're helping radio stations move into this digital world, into this mobile world. And I asked him just at the end of the episode that I did with him, I said, so, I mean, what's caught your fancy? Like, what are you excited about? And he's like, I thought it was going to be something like radio technology or something like that. And he goes, okay, you got to see this app. It's called Timbre. It's a band discovery app. And I went, no, I meant about your business. He's, no, you got to see this app. The same thing, right? Is that that's what you love to hear. Those guys that he's not even related to you guys, and he's passionate about what you guys are doing. And so I can understand that, and that's what you want to have. Definitely what you want to have.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, it was. I'll tell you, we launched it on September 7th. Apple made it the #1 new and noteworthy app for the iPhone 5 launch, which was just incredible. We had no pre-existing connection to Apple. They found it. They liked it. We actually dropped Timbre into a wholly owned subsidiary of Intrepid on September 20th, not because we were raising money, but because we knew Timbre was more than an app. It's bigger than an app. It's more of a concept. It could be a company. So it didn't hurt us any. It cost us a couple $1,000s. We dropped it into a subsidiary just so that we were as flexible as humanly possible based on what might come in the future.
So what do you do with this? Like, so you've invested a lot of time and blood, sweat, tears. You're maintaining this app, which kind of goes against the convention of your other business, right? Which is your consulting arm. So you're maintaining this. You're doing support. You're doing all the marketing on all of these things, which is a completely different piece to what your bread and butter is. So you put all this effort into it. How do you turn this into revenue? Do you turn this into revenue? Is this just a showpiece for you? What do you do with something like this?
So we figured Timbre, the minute Apple made it a new and noteworthy app, not that that's the holy grail.
It is the holy grail. Come on. What were your numbers before and after that?
It was phenomenal. I mean, when I say it wasn't the holy grail, I just mean that being featured by Apple is the holy grail. Being a new and noteworthy app is something slightly below the holy grail. So I'll give you two interesting numbers that I don't think I've given anyone else.
Sweet, exclusive. Everybody, listen up. Listen up.
Yeah. So interesting number one. We had Techcrunch was kind enough to write a piece about it. Gave them a little advance notice. They thought it looked cool. They were great. They were really kind to it. We got 2,000 downloads within 6 hours of that Techcrunch piece running.
Okay, that's good.
Which was good numbers. For an app that we did no PR, no marketing. It was great. A week later, we got featured by Apple, and we did 10,000 downloads in an hour. Off the new and noteworthy, right? So it was just explosive. People went nuts. The people that found it loved it. There is absolutely positively no better way to have an app get noticed than being featured by Apple.
It is the amount of control that they have is incredible. And you guys didn't lobby them. You didn't go to them. Did you ask anybody why? Like, why do you think it worked?
We didn't lobby them. We kind of sort of went to them, right? So I did a bunch of networking in Boston trying to find people who knew Apple or knew someone at Apple, and I eventually found a guy who was really, really helpful. Who said, look, I know someone in a different department in the AppStore. It was in the iTunes affiliate department. And he said, send me some screenshots, send me a description, I'll forward it to them, and if they think it's interesting, maybe they'll forward it over to the Apple category team. So that's what we did. He BCC'd me on that email, and I would imagine it helped. Apple, people in the category team found it really fast. We were featured about new and noteworthy about a week after we submitted it. But that's kind of the lobbying we did.
So why do you think they chose it?
I think they chose it because it was different, because it was unique, because it was really really interesting. We Apple for a long time would only feature things that were kind of complied with the HIG, the Human Interface Guidelines, and matched their aesthetic. And I think they've morphed a bit. You can't do things that are confusing, but I think they like it when people push the envelope and it's not another dual stick shooter or another list view that news reader, another app in a really tired category. We push the envelope in a way, and I think they really like that.
So, I mean, let me kind of put a conclusion to this. Is that, I mean, when you're building an app and it's a unique interface, right, and a unique experience, something that is very much Apple-like, or something that is innovative. And this seems like a no-brainer now that I'm speaking it, and I should have probably kept this thought in my head. But that's really the way that Apple is going to, or anybody is going to find you, and it's going to stick, right? I mean, it just goes without saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, the way to get featured is, this sounds like a tautology and it sounds like really useless advice, but the best thing to get featured is to build something awesome.
That's so true. I could have just said that, but I'm glad you concur with that. It sounds so simple, right? But it's so hard to do.
I think, I'm not ashamed to say that 70% of building something awesome is luck, right? I mean, we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, but, Timbre, there was a lot of luck. We stumbled onto an idea and a design that was really cool and different.
So back to the question is that, I mean, what do you do with this now that you've got this? So obviously, I mean, you get those 10,000 downloads in an hour, and then you kind of go through that exhilaration of being featured. Thousands and thousands of people using it, into that trough of despair because the next day it's not 10,000 people that are downloading it. But you've got a number, right? Do you ever release those numbers? How many people are using, or how many downloads you've had?
We
that's
don't.
Fine. Don't sweat
it. The number we are releasing is we had about 100,000 downloads in the first 2 months.
That's crazy. I mean, that's incredible, right? The reach that's awesome. And you're in a limited geographic area, right? Like you're in Boston, you're in New York, right?
No, it's all over
it's
the
all
US.
over the US. Okay, not up in Canada. That's right. Oh, that's right. Not up here.
Yeah, well, no, it's available there now.
Well, I've got it. I think I actually had to go through my US account to get it when I did download it. So if it's available in Canada,
the new version of Timbre is fully localized on the AppStore in 34 countries.
Sweet. That is awesome. Okay, well, I will update my version. The question still stands: is this a for revenue, for profit idea? Do you know that yet? Are you going to raise money around this, around just Timbre?
Yeah. So the minute we got new and noteworthy, we were in the black as far as we were concerned. Like just the recognition of having an app that did well and looked cool was, it was a net positive experiment. From there, we struggled with that. Like, what is the next step? What do we want to do? And I'll tell you what I didn't want to do was go through 3 months of diligence trying to convince VCs that this was a great idea. So we dropped it into its own company. We talked about what was next. And the next day, I met with a VC here in Boston, Nicole Stata. She is the founding partner of Boston Seed Capital. And it just, a mutual friend of ours said, hey, you guys got to meet. I said, okay, cool. I'll meet Nicole. And, we met and we talked about a bunch of stuff and we knew a lot of the same people. And I showed her Timbre and she loved it. She just absolutely loved it. And she said, we have a quarterly partnership meeting that happens to be tomorrow. Can you come? And I said, well, Nicole, we're not really raising money. We don't really need money. I don't know what to do with money. But I guess, I said, it's a quarterly meeting. Isn't it full? And she said, I'll bum someone. I want the guys to see this. So I went to the quarterly meeting, and they really, really liked it. It was good. So there was this thing called Boston Shark Tank about a month later, and we went to the Shark Tank thing. We got in because Boston Seed liked us, and they were kind of sponsoring us, and we had to go through the whole interview process, and there were other factors to getting in, but we got in. So we were one of 6 companies to pitch at the Shark Tank thing in Boston. And we got up on stage, and I had a 1-slide presentation. It's not that I didn't put time into it. I tell people this, entrepreneurs this all the time, and we're a really extreme example. You can do 2. If you want to raise money, you can do 1 of 2 things. Number one, you can spend 6 months raising money with a good idea. Number two, you can spend 5 months and 29 days finding your first 100,000 users and spend 1 year raising money, right? And that's what we did. So we went to the Shark Tank thing with huge metrics. Like, we were right in the middle of the new noteworthy and the buzz. And people were excited. And, Scott Kersney was a local journalist, tweeted out like 2 days before the event that we were the hottest app in Boston. And we had all this buzz. We went to this event, which is kind of like, it was Shark Tank. If you've seen the Shark Tank TV show, only a local Boston version with a local investment panel. Fred Destin was on it from Atlas, and a bunch of really cool people. Dave Balter from Buzz Agent. And I got up and I gave my 4-minute pitch, and Fred Destin stood up and offered us $150K at lower terms than I had requested. And I told him kind of what I told Nicole. I said, Fred, that's really nice of you, but I'm not really inclined to negotiate because I don't even need to raise money right now, and it's doing really well on its own. And one of my, you got to see this video of this thing happening in real time, because one of my advisors jumped up and said, "Are you crazy?"
I love it.
Negotiate. And then Dave Balter jumped up and said, we'll put 150 in at your terms. And then Fred said, I'm in, but it's 200K. So we raised money in a day. Out of that event, we raised $350,000. We had a term sheet the next day, and we closed 3 weeks later.
Oh my God. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't think it was totally the gimmick of the event. Boston Seed had indicated we were going to get a term sheet that week either way. They liked it. They had seen it. They were interested. But from beginning to end, my entire fundraising cycle was 5 weeks.
5 weeks.
Yeah.
5 weeks, and you closed around. I mean, you were generating revenue from what? Referral fees into iTunes and to Ticketmaster?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ticket sales and iTunes referral fees. It wasn't much. We raised a very small seed round. We could have raised more. We raised $360K. It was just enough for Timbre to hire 1 or 2 people dedicated. I'm serving as dual CEO, so I'm CEO of both companies. And, I made it really clear to the investors that for the first 6 months, that was how it was going to be. If they wanted to hire a CEO, they should invest in a different company. And they were cool with that and on board. We had a really smooth negotiation. And it went well.
So you must have pitched them on some way that you're going to make money with this app.
Yeah. So yes, I mean we had a whole slide with 10 different ways we could make money, right? And I can't tell you which of those will be the prominent way in a year because I'm not sure. What I can tell you is getting referral fees from ticket sales, getting referral fees from selling music creates 0 friction for our users, and hence that's what we're doing today. And for the next year, we will not do any monetization that creates any friction for acquiring new users, right? We're all about acquiring new users.
So that's what it is. It's friction-free user acquisition right now, with the side of revenue where it's not an intrusion.
Exactly. Ways we could generate revenue in the future with a big enough user base. It becomes somewhat obvious. Imagine a world where there are 1 million people around the world that are using Timbre every Friday to help them figure out what they're going to do, right? And furthermore, it's pretty concentrated. If there's 1 million people around the world, there's a good 30,000 in New York City, and there's 30,000 in LA, and there's 30,000 in London, right? And we've got this critical mass of people that we can help steer a bit, right? So we become a much more targeted, powerful version of Yelp at that point, right? So we can do, sponsored listings and featured listings, and we can help break new bands. We can help expose new bands. We can do a lot of cool things someday that we'll get there.
I think it's all based on user base, and I love that. Breaking new bands, band discovery to me is one of the big things, and I think that's really where this fits in. But you're right, user acquisition for this instance, spend wisely, build as you said, frictionless, friction-free product, and kind of test monetization, right? And I think that's awesome. Okay, we're rapidly running out of time here. In fact, we're long past running out of time. I got to ask you, is there one thing? Last question here, Mark. I could go on with you all day. I want to have you back on when you start to release more around Timbre, and when this product hits in March. We're in 2013 now, so if you're listening to this later on in life, the product's probably out. Hopefully by then. But maybe at some point in the near future, bring you back on to start to talk about some of the other things that you're doing inside of your organization as you're kind of transforming, this 20% time into all these different companies, which is pretty amazing, and it's one of the great things that the mobile industry can do. But if you look back as you were developing Timbre, as your company was developing Timbre, and you've gone through this process, is there anything that sticks out that like what worked so well that you're going to be emulating, and what didn't work so well that you're going to be ditching throughout this process?
One of those open-ended questions.
Well, it's really around, ideation. I'm really interested in this idea that, listen, were there ideas that you threw out? Was it too complicated at some point? How did you distill it down to its essence? And because that's
Sure.
something that's tangible, that at the end of the day, you had to remove stuff to make this the way that it is. And that's a process.
Yeah.
So something like that. Anything like that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I cannot stress enough the number one affliction of bad apps and bad product owners for apps, in the development process is feature creep, cramming features, what we call share vomit, cramming in stuff that doesn't need to be there, right? And we probably have 300 items sitting in a backlog. We're getting feature requests every day through Twitter and Facebook and emails for people who want stuff, and we're not going to add much, right? The new version of feature has the new version of Timbre has this really cool curated list of Grammy artists, and we're going to be morphing that into kind of a festival feature. We can help plan festivals, but for the most part, we're not going to add geofencing. We're not going to add a map view, and we probably won't add reminders and push notifications. And there's like a zillion things we could do, and they've all been up on a whiteboard. And every single time we come back and we say, is that going to enhance the experience for people that are trying to find new music? Right? We're one tap away from listening to songs. The address is right there. You can throw it in Google Maps. Maybe it'd be quicker if we had our own map view, but it takes away from the experience. So the hardest thing in building Timbre was not cramming stuff in, right? And every meeting I have, with investors, with customers, with people who use Timbre, it's you got to add this feature. You got to put it in there, right? And we say no a lot because we're just not willing to alter the experience.
Was there? I lied. This is my last. Was there a feature that you were so adamant that needed to be in there, or that you heard that you were contemplating and it was so painful to remove, but you're so thankful you did? Yes, there is. So the first version of Timbre, not a lot of people know this. The first version of Timbre had Spotify and iTunes in it. So you could listen to the music on iTunes, you can listen to the music on Spotify. And we took Spotify out for now. And I can't comment on if and when it'll be back. But I'll tell you the biggest thing we took out of Spotify, and the big reason we took it out, is in one of our beta tests, in our main big beta. We had both in there. So you go into Timbre, you tap on a song, and an interstitial would pop up. Hey, do you want to log in with Spotify, or do you want to listen to the app music on iTunes? In a friendly beta, 35% of our users never got past that page. One choice. You put one choice in an app, even if they're friendly users, they didn't actually hear music. So the best decision we made was to make the app that simple. There are no choices. I love it.
And our conversion rate, not conversion rate, but the number of people who open Timbre once and hear at least one song is over 90%, which, we have 90% of the people that download Timbre experience all of Timbre, right? And that's really, really rare. And that leads to a really high conversion rate. It leads to a really high retention rate. It leads to all the metrics that made it super, super easy for us to raise money.
You see, that in alone, that 2 minutes, one choice basically eliminated over a third of the people getting past that point. It just shows you how fickle we are as humans, but how important it is. How important it is just to have one simple process to get where you got to go. Oh.
Yep.
There, you see? That's why you listen to the end of these episodes. That is exactly why, because it's the gold right there. Man, I could do an entire dissertation just around that one choice. It's terrible. No choice. No choice.
No choices.
Okay, so Mark, where should of all the websites, where should we be sending people at this point for them to find more information about you?
Sure. So Intrepid's website is intrepid.io.
Yep.
My Twitter handle, which I'm actually using these days, is @Kaslaw, Kazlaw.
Okay.
And Timbre's webpage is timbreapp.com to kind of learn more about Timbre. It's not a web product. We're not bringing it to the web anytime soon. The best thing you can do is go to the AppStore and search for Timbre and download it.
Do that.
But
it's beautiful, and if you are a UI or UX nut, you will really enjoy this app. You'll see how simple it is. Like, no choices. So simple, so intuitive. Man, it struck me the first time I saw it. It struck Patrick Reynolds from Triton, who gave me the lead to get on you guys, to get on the show. That's just simply because it struck us as beautiful. And in fact, all the other music apps or the discovery apps pale in comparison. So congratulations on what you've done, Mark, on all three things. So, I mean, we're talking about the consulting company, Intrepid Labs, the non-money making Intrepid Labs. It's like babysitting. And then, of course, Timbre app and whatever comes next. I really appreciate you doing this, man. Thank you. We've been speaking with Mark Kasdorf, who is, you're the CEO of Timbre app, you're the CEO of Intrepid.io, and you're a co-founder of Intrepid Labs. That's a good way to describe you?
Yes. Yep. When I sign official papers where I have to put a title, I always use the word founder, just because CEO makes me kind of cool.
CEO, that's right. Up in the ivory towers, the CEO. Yeah. So the founder of all those. And please go to Intrepid.io, go to timbreapp.com, and go to Intrepid Labs. Go and check these properties out. And if you're in Boston, walk by and say hi for me, because I'm going to come and visit. I guarantee it. I'm going to come and visit, Mark. You'll never get rid of me.
I'd like that. We can show you some cool stuff.
Wicked, wicked, wicked. All right, Mark, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. For you guys out there who are watching, listening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're at the gym, you're on a bike, you're running, whatever you're doing, you're at the office, you're falling asleep to this. Really appreciate you spending some time with Untethered.tv and myself and with Mark. And if you love this as much as I loved doing this, reach out to him. Let him know that you saw, heard, downloaded the app as a result of being on Untethered.tv. Make me happy, make him happy. And boy, that's good karma. 2 people happy out of this. All right. Cool. Thanks, everybody. See you next time on Untethered.tv. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.